Greetings and welcome from the League of Women Voters of Portland. I'm Debbie Kay, League President. The League is dedicated to making democracy work. One of our core beliefs is that democracy functions best when voters are informed about the issues and engaged in their communities. For that reason, we present these programs to give our Portland and Multnomah County neighbors an opportunity to think about the issues that affect our lives and the well-being of our communities. The League is grateful for support from our media partner, Metro East Community Media. They record our community education panels and our voter education presentations. Those include candidate and ballot measure forums and video voters guide. And Metro East rebroadcasts those on community access channels and social media. Please tell your friends, colleagues, and family to watch this video and podcast, listen to the podcast, which will be posted on our website, lwvpdx.org, by October 7th. We sincerely thank our speakers, the moderator, and the League volunteers who donate their time and expertise to bring these programs to you. The moderator for tonight's program is my esteemed colleague, Marge Easley. She covers gun safety state legislation for the League of Women Voters of Oregon Action Committee. I'll turn the program over to you, Marge. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to the discussion from our expert panelists who will focus on measures to prevent gun violence and ensure safety in our schools and neighborhoods. We thank you all for your dedicated public service and look forward to hearing from each of you. We'll hear from our speakers for 1 hour and then open the program up for questions from the audience through the chat in Zoom. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. Joining us are first, Dr. Kathleen Carlson. She's chair of the Gun Violence Prevention Research Center at Oregon Health and Science University. In 2022, she launched the Research Center to collect objective data and evaluate novel interventions to inform policymakers in their work on preventing gun violence. We also have Pastor Ed Williams, chair of the Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group. In June of 2021, the Portland Police Bureau launched this program in response to the growing gun violence crisis in Portland. This oversight group works to reduce gun violence through prevention, intervention, and response. Next is Andrew Scott, chair of the Portland Public School Board of the Portland Public Schools. Andrew has more than 20 years of experience in the public sector and currently serves as Deputy Chief Operating Officer of Metro. He grew up in Southwest Portland and attended Portland Public Schools. His 2 children currently attend a Portland public school. And lastly, Paul Kemp is co-founder and president of the Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership, otherwise known as GoFro, which seeks responsible and reasonable solutions to preventing gun violence. They are in partnership with physicians and public health professionals to seek ways to reduce gun violence and aid in suicide prevention programs. We would like to begin our conversations with the panelists by asking them what motivated them to become involved in helping to reduce gun violence in our city and state. And we're going to start with Dr. Carlson. As an injury epidemiologist, what in your life and life's work brought you to address gun violence as a public health issue and then launch the Gun Violence Prevention Research Center at OHSU?
Thank you, Marge. Would you like slides now, or do you want just a short response to the question?
Just a short response is good, and then we'll see the slides in a little bit.
Okay. Well, I'm an injury researcher and I love all things injury prevention. And about 5 to 7 years ago, I got my first grant funding to focus on firearm injury prevention. And we've just built the research program since then. I've also experienced the loss of a family member from a firearm injury, from a suicide with a firearm. And I grew up in a family of firearm owners, so I feel like I understand multiple angles of this issue and hope to bring my skill set in epidemiology to address it.
Well, Kathleen, we appreciate your research and your data-driven approach to addressing this serious issue. It's much needed. Pastor Ed Williams, you've been a strong community leader with the city in supporting neighborhoods to live free from gun violence and in offering programs and policies to reduce gun injuries and deaths. What motivates you to devote so much of your life's work to reducing gun violence?
Well, I can think of two things right off the top that motivates me. Number one, as we continue to see the level of gun violence that's occurring in our community, for me personally, it was a fresh awakening to the realization that this sustained level of gun violence that we're experiencing, in my words, it represents, the continuation of man's inhumanity to man. And as a pastor, that is something that we just do not want to see. We should be in better relationships with one another, and I just believe that there are ways in which we can resolve our differences, be they big or small, without just simply resorting to gun violence. That we can resolve our differences and still maintain our sense of humanity and respect for one another. The second thing that motivated me is a desire to try and remedy, our community of this harm, so that, and I guess it's kind of personal, so that my 12-year-old granddaughter and my 12-year-old grandson will not get to their young adult age and then find themselves still dealing with this issue. I believe that we as responsible adults right now should be taking care of that so that the next generations can be free of that burden.
Pastor Ed, I want to thank you for making a difference in the lives of those impacted by gun violence through your engagement and advocacy. Andrew Scott, on June 14th, the Board of Portland Public Schools voted to expand the district's ban on firearms to prohibit concealed weapons on school campuses. Can you tell us how the Portland Public School Board was able to achieve a unanimous vote in favor of this policy?
Well, I actually, just to ask Marge, I think, are we still asking the question about how we got involved, or do you want me to dive into?
Yes, this is how you got involved, and then how did this lead to that decision?
Great. Well, and I'll get into that, I think, a little bit later as we sort of talk a little bit more detail. But thank you for having me here today. And I'm actually probably the panelist with the least, sort of in-depth knowledge around this issue. I think my role on the Portland Public School Board, one of the things that we really focus on is keeping all of our children safe, all of our students safe, and clearly there's a role there around the policies we pass. I will also say, as a parent in this community of two teenagers right now, this is an issue that's near and dear to my heart. A long time ago, back in graduate school, I actually did research and around concealed weapons permit laws and whether they had an impact on crime rates. And I don't think it's a spoiler alert to say they don't have an impact. And it was actually in countering some research that was coming out of the University of Chicago at the time that was claiming that some of these concealed weapons permit laws, which 20 years ago were much less common than they are today. But so I dabbled in a little bit back then, and I've been doing public policy for the last 20 years. So I'm glad in my role on the board that we were able to bring forward this policy, and I'll talk a little bit later in the meeting about how we got there. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Andrew, and for your dedication to our students and your important work. And Paul Camp, as a gun owner, outdoor enthusiast, and veteran, what motivated you to become an advocate for reasonable and responsible solutions to preventing gun violence?
Well, the driving factor was the killing of my brother-in-law about 10 years ago this December at the Clackamas Town Center Mall. And then, learning how the shooter got a hold of the firearms and what the current state of Oregon's gun laws were and national gun laws, and a lot of the cultural attitudes around gun ownership. A group of us formed our GoPro group, with the goal ultimately of changing the culture around gun ownership and bringing it back to a more responsible position. And also in Oregon, there was no middle voice. We kind of had the extremes. So we wanted to be a voice in the middle for the majority of gun owners that, that certainly that reach out to us, have very similar positions and attitudes, and are supporting the gun safety laws that we have and have passed. That, and also my daughter's a teacher, and the impacts on her as a teacher with students and having to do active shooter drills, and the calls I get from her after every school shooting that happen around the country. There have been too many, and I don't know how teachers do it.
Well, thank you, Paul, for devoting so much of your energy to this work. And thank you all for joining us and for your dedication and service to your community and the state. Before we start, there is an elephant in the room, and that is the fact that ballot measure 114 is on the ballot this November, and as an initiated state statute. And so I'd like to just present some basic information about this ballot measure so that we're all on the same page. And this forum tonight is not specifically about this ballot measure, but any comments about it are appreciated. And I do have to mention as a spoiler that the League is endorsing this measure. And we have a voters pamphlet statement on the issue. Just want to say that the ballot title is requires a permit to acquire firearms. The police maintain a permit firearm database, and it criminally prohibits certain ammunition magazines. The chief petitioners of this measure are Lift Every Voice Oregon, and this is primarily a group of religious folks who felt the need, who have been following this issue for quite some time, came together and began this grassroots effort that now includes many different organizations. The financial impact is an important one. It came out that this is indeterminate, which means that it really is difficult to know how much this is going to impact because there is a fee involved. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. First, the first thing is the permit to purchase issue. And the permit is issued by a county sheriff or police chief. It's good for 5 years. So you don't have to get one every year or every time you have a firearm. This is good for 5 years. The applicant must complete an approved safety course, and this does include live fire training. They must pay a fee of $65 and be fingerprinted and photographed and pass a state police background check with no exceptions. So this is eliminating the Charleston loophole, which allowed you to get a firearm after 3 days. This is, you must pass the background check. You may be denied a permit if you are reasonably likely to present a danger to self or others. And this is showing a pattern over a period of time that you are a danger to self or others, and you do have the right to appeal if you're denied. And the state police will maintain a database of these permits. The other part of this measure is the regulation of large capacity magazines to prohibit the manufacture, sale, transfer, and possession of magazines over 10 rounds. You may retain the magazine if it's used for your sole use on personal property at a shooting range, competition, or lawful recreational activity. There is an exception for military and law enforcement, and the violation is a Class A misdemeanor But if you have prior convictions for this offense, it would turn into a Class C felony. So I am going to stop the share at this point. And I realize that if you haven't heard about this measure so far, you are sure to hear about it in the next few weeks. And so I will turn it over now to our panelists who will discuss their work and innovations to ensure safety in our schools and communities. And Kathleen, we will start with you, and the floor is yours for 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Marge. Thank you so much for hosting us tonight. And can you see my slides? Okay.
Yes.
So I wanted to start us off with an introduction to the idea of approaching firearm injuries and gun violence using the tools of public health. And that's something that I like to share far and wide with our community, because I think that there's much hope in making a difference if we use our established public health toolbox. So, okay, first, just to give a high-level definition of what I'm talking about when I say public health. Public health is the science and art of preventing disease and injury, of prolonging life and promoting health through the organized efforts and informed choices of society, organizations, public and private communities, and individuals. If that sounds like a very lofty goal, it is. That's why all of us are here tonight. Another very important aspect of public health is that of social justice. And that is because historically and current day, the distribution of health and safety across our population is not equitable. So public health also strives to increase equity of access to safety and to environments that create and maintain health. Public health takes a population level approach and it focuses on prevention. So our partners in the medical system, they help us in the treatment of gun violence, but they'll treat one patient at a time. Similarly, our partners in criminal justice address one victim or perpetrator at a time. Whereas in public health, we're thinking upstream, we're thinking prevention before an event even occurs, and we're thinking of prevention at the population level. So what kind of nudges, economic, sociologic, population level nudges can we make to influence rates of adverse outcomes, in this case, injury or violent injury. And this takes all hands on deck. So this is just a snapshot of the partners that we turn to when we think of preventing injury or firearm violence in our population. And I think a lot of these are represented here tonight. We definitely have our advocates, maybe some policymakers, law enforcement, criminal justice, education, our faith community, universities and our research institutions, and so on and so forth. So all hands on deck are needed for these big intractable problems like gun violence. And why use these tools for injuries and firearm injuries and gun violence in particular? Well, as an epidemiologist and an injury epidemiologist, these data are my passion. Fatal injuries are the 3rd to 4th leading causes of death in the US and in Oregon. So these are, we don't often hear of injury as a major cause of a major burden to public health. We think of cancer, chronic diseases, infectious diseases, COVID, and so on. But injury takes many more lives than a lot of those diseases that we often talk about. And just to give an example, this is a chart of the leading causes of death in Oregon in 2020. And this last column here is all ages. And you can see here that unintentional injury is the 3rd leading cause of death in Oregon. And suicide is the 9th leading cause of death in Oregon. And you can see how these play out over the lifespan of individual Oregonians. Violent injuries comprise a large portion of the overall injury umbrella, and firearms are a leading source of violent injury. So here we're looking at the national picture. So all fatal injuries across the US, and these cells in green are self-harm injuries, are suicide injuries. Those in red are homicides. And you can see here how firearms play a considerable role in both suicides and homicides across the lifespan. How do we compare in Oregon relative to the US? Our per capita rates of fatal firearm injuries are relatively similar, maybe a notch lower in Oregon than in the US as a whole. But this per capita rate is the equivalent of 45,000 people that we lost in 1 year alone in the US. In Oregon, that was almost 600 Oregonians that died from firearm injuries in 2020. And this is a problem that's not getting any better. So in the last 20 years, we've seen the numbers of firearm injuries increase slowly but steadily over this 20-year period. We're hearing about this a lot in the last couple of years. And yes, it has gone up a lot, but this is a problem that has been on the rise for at least 20 years. And I put motor vehicle deaths here in contrast, so you can see how, we've had successes in another major source of fatal injury, then maybe an increase again. But overall, we are doing better in the motor vehicle fatality realm than we are firearm fatalities. Firearm fatalities in Oregon are, mainly caused by suicide. 3/4 of this pie is related to firearm suicide. This is a little bit less if we're looking at the US as a whole. Homicides play a big role in Oregon as well. And this piece of the pie has grown since 2020. And that's what we're hearing a lot about in the media recently. I've been talking about the fatal firearm injuries, but the non-fatal injuries also carry a major burden to public health, and we often don't hear about these. But what we know is that there are at least twice as many non-fatal firearm injuries as there are fatalities. And these non-fatal injuries result in disability and ongoing problems. So they require hospitalizations, treatments in emergency departments, loss of work, and a feeling of lack of safety, right? So non-fatal firearm injuries are a major piece of the puzzle as well. And we want to get a handle on these injuries as much as we do the fatal injuries. So how do we do that? What can be done? First, we start with the premise in public health, especially, that injuries are not accidents. They are patterned over time, and they are patterned over geographic regions. And if we can identify these patterns, then we can use all the tools of public health to point at those causes of firearm violence or firearm injuries and chip away at the rates of those injuries. Injuries are not accidents, they're predictable, and therefore they're preventable. One model that we often use, especially in looking at violent injuries and firearm violence, is the social ecological model. And this acknowledges that individuals, which is where we point most of our interventions, right, at the education or law enforcement and healthcare level, individuals are just one cog in this larger component that involves the relationships between those individuals, the relationships with the individuals in their communities, and also everything that's going on at the societal level. So our interventions need to not be just pointed at the individuals, but at all of these levels and simultaneously to be the most effective. And this is just an example. I won't go into all of these, but my team put this together to represent evidence-based practices that are addressing firearm injury rates and gun violence rates across the country. And these come from our colleagues in these institutions here. So just different examples of things that we can do. And I present this to help paint the picture that addressing the firearms themselves is a really important piece of the puzzle, very important, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle that we have. Policy is not the only piece of the puzzle either, although it can be very effective. But there's a lot of other room that we navigate in public health to make a difference. And just a snippet about what we're doing here at OHSU and the VA. So you mentioned that we're starting a new center on gun violence prevention research. This is really in response to the recent uptick in violence, but it's been going on for a while. And what we're doing, we're really just getting a start, and this is slow, painfully slow at times, especially when we know that there's deaths every single day that occur. But we are trying to establish the numbers, so studying the epidemiology of both fatal and non-fatal firearm injuries. So we're really trying to understand the different levels of this pyramid. And if we can get those numbers locked in, then we can track them over time to know whether or not our interventions, our new policies, our community level initiatives, whether they're working. We're also examining the causes and consequences of firearm injuries. So for example, trying to hone in on what the causes within each of the levels of the socio-ecological model are, so that our partners within the community and our state and city and county institutions can know where to point their tools and their resources. We're also building a team to help evaluate the effectiveness of the interventions that are in play or that potentially could be passed and in play. So one example is our extreme risk protection order in Oregon, which was a policy that was passed several years ago. We're studying now how often that's used, and also trying to understand how much healthcare providers know about this FRPO law and are willing to counsel their patients about its use. We also have a new law and funding for hospital-based violence intervention programs, which was a huge win for Oregon and especially our community here in Portland. And we're working on evaluating the effectiveness of the implementation of that intervention here across the state. And finally, probably not finally, but one other major effort that we're making is building out our ability to disseminate this information to those who are boots on the ground doing the work, front lines in our communities. So how can we turn our data into knowledge and provide that knowledge equally so that everyone has access to this information and can use it to make change? And next steps, I'd say, for not just for us, but for everyone, and that's just building out greater education and awareness, building our research program, making sure it's funded and sustainable, and then providing advocacy for what we know can work, and trying out more things and evaluating them so that we can chip away at this problem. And it's just, interwoven, and will take all of us together to address this. Lots of work to do. My contact information is here if anyone wants to reach out to me.
I wanted to thank you for your approach, your evidence-based approach. It is so much needed right now, and thanks for telling us about your projects. And I'm going to move now to Pastor Ed. We look forward to your remarks right now.
Well, thank you, Marge, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for having me here with you all tonight. Certainly, it's my privilege and honor to share some time and this information with you. I feel a little overwhelmed by the title of being an expert in this area. I'm learning, quite a bit, and have learned quite a bit along with my colleagues. So I'll kind of water down the characterization of being an expert. I'll share with you what I've learned and what I know. First off, I want to give a big shout out to the Reverend Dr. Knudsen and all of his colleagues and group who've done just a fantastic job in bringing Measure 114 to a reality. Just impressed by the way in which he was able to galvanize the entire state, around this issue. And so I wish that ballot measure all the success that is possible. With regard to the Focused Intervention Team Community Oversight Group, more locally referred to as FITCAL, this is a group that is comprised of 11 community members from all across the Portland community. And we gather now on a bi-weekly basis, but in our inception, we were meeting on a weekly basis, 2 hours per meeting time, ourselves along with various members of the Portland Police Bureau command structure, coming together for the purposes of forming and putting together a team, and then providing guidance and oversight to that team as it goes about doing its work. I'll kind of do this in reverse. As you'll currently hear about the FITCOG at this point, it will more than likely be around the most recent recommendation that we made to the mayor, and that he's now moving forward for full consideration by City Council around a piece of technology called ShotSpotter. It is one of several focused deterrence tools that are currently being used by other police agencies around the country. And having spent time at a seminar and hearing presentations about ShotSpotter, having spent time with police officials in another jurisdiction in the Tampa, Florida area, around their use of ShotSpotter as one of its focused deterrence tools, along with some other items. We, as a FITCOG, were moved and were convinced, I should say, that we thought that this was a tool that we ought to give strong consideration to being used by the FIT team here in Portland, and obviously that can also expand to the broader Portland Police Bureau use. But certainly our efforts are around making the focused intervention team, we call it the FIT team, making it as successful and as well equipped as possible to go out and do its work of reducing gun violence in the city of Portland. As with any piece of technology, it's not perfect, but we believe that it will be a useful, as they would call it, force multiplier in helping them go about doing their work, because it will provide them with more information about gun violence that is occurring in the city than they currently have. And not only will it provide them with more information, but it will provide them with faster information, so it can put them at the scene of a shooting with more precision and in a faster time. Just back up just a little bit. What is ShotSpotter? It uses acoustical sensors that are strategically placed throughout the city, and where they're going to be placed at is yet to be determined. How broad the area is going to be is yet to be determined. How many will be used is still yet to be determined. But essentially, these acoustical sensors are placed in an area, and through a process of triangulation, they are able to detect gunshots, provide a pinpoint, location as to where the gunshot has occurred. We're told it's within, I believe it was like 88 feet of where a gunfire has occurred. Can put officers in that position, and thereby they can be more effective in responding to real-time shootings that are occurring in our city. So we believe that technology can help get them there faster, can help get them there quicker, can get them there in a more precise way. And then if you use that technology in conjunction with the airplane that is typically up, those two pieces of technology can really help get the police to where they need to be, more precisely and with more speed. That can help them perhaps intervene those who have just been engaged in shooting, either as a shooter or as a victim. So it could help them to catch those who have perpetrated the shooting, and or on the other side, it can help to get them there quicker to perhaps help save the life of one who has been victimized by a shooting, because it gets them there earlier, and they can help provide medical attention and certainly direct the medical providers to specific locations, get them there quicker and faster. So that's kind of the back end of where we are right now in terms of the work that we are doing. But know this, that the overall goal of the FIT team and the community oversight group is for the purposes, singular stated purpose, to reduce gun violence in the city of Portland. And you mentioned that earlier by saying that, well, you know, this thing is involved in prevention, intervention, and response. And this is indeed an effort that's designed to touch all three of those areas. So it's not just about police enforcement, it's also about police presence, because one of the things that we know that was missing, particularly during a lot of the COVID period, was the presence of police officers, you know, in our community in a real way. No one was specifically or singularly focused on gun violence that was happening in our cities. And so, you know, in the criminal world, folk can think that, well, since nobody's watching, I got plenty of time to do what I need to do. But having a team that is present to represent police presence and enforcement, you know, can have the impact of tamping that down. Having a police force that is or a team that is present in the community can also provide a measure of safety to community residents by knowing that, hey, your local police officers are indeed present and available to do as they are sworn to do, and that is to serve and to protect. And so as a fit call, a good part of what we do is we work alongside the PPB command to weigh in on the work that is being done by the FIT team on a real-time basis. We have both a public side of our meetings that occur, but then we also go into what's known as a confidential briefing side, and we are given access to information and details about the work that the FIT team is doing that the general public is not privy to, and we're able to gain that information because we have executed, I'll call it confidentiality agreement with the city attorney and the city of Portland. And so that's why we're able to gain that information. And from that, we use that information and current data to help inform and to direct, assist with directing the work and the work that the FIT team, how they go about doing their work. And as Dr. Carlson mentioned, she mentioned, evidence-based practices and materials that are used in the healthcare industry. Well, a lot of the work that's done by the FIT team is driven by data. It's driven by evidence. And so we speak a lot about data-driven encounters that the FIT team has with the community, and that is to deal with the historical concerns that were raised about, well, the police just kind of go about their business and they seem to pick on, Blacks and Hispanics and other minorities. This work is done based on evidence. We go where the evidence takes us, and so that's how this team goes about doing its work. And then rolling back just a little bit further, the FIT team, for those who don't know, is comprised right now of 12 officers and two sergeants. We have about 3 or 4 officers who are part of what we would call the sort of our standby team or our call-up team in case some of the current officers are not able to serve. I can tell you that this team, these 12 officers were chosen from a pool of about 47 applicants from the Portland Police Department who applied to be a part of this team. This team is engaged in some of the most directly dangerous work in the city of Portland, but yet there were 47 officers who stood up and said that they wanted to be a part of this team. There were at least 7 individuals who interviewed for the sergeant's position, and from that pool of 7, we were able to choose two sergeants. And when I say we, I mean the members of the community oversight group were part of the the interview and selection process in both selecting the sergeants and in selecting the officers that now comprise this team. And we don't believe that any other group in the city of Portland, any other community group, has had this level of engagement and involvement in the standing up of a specialized police unit. And so this was something that when this idea was first brought up, back in December of 2020, that Chief Lavelle and the mayor, that they specifically Chief Lavelle, that he specifically asked that if we're going to stand up a focused intervention team or a specialized team, that right along with that there be a community oversight group component with it, so as to ensure that the community was weighing in right now in real time in the actions and the activities that this team was going to be engaged in. Oftentimes, we get involved on the back end, and usually on the back end is when things have gone awry. And the question is asked, well, who's checking, who's participating? Well, Chief Lavelle wanted this to be a part of the process, not on the back end, but on the front end. And so we have been faithfully and actively doing that work. It's a lot of work. It's heavy work. It's very tenacious work. It's not very popular work, but it's necessary work. It's necessary because too many lives continue to be snuffed out way too early. I'll say that again. Too many lives continue to be snuffed out way too early. I'll leave you with this final thought, and then I'll turn it over to the rest of the panelists for their presentations. During a walk through a neighborhood a couple of weeks ago, I had the occasion to run into an administrator over one of the, I won't name the school component within the city of Portland, but one of the local alternative school, I'll call it entities. And what she shared with me and one of my colleagues as we were taking this walk is that over the last 22 years, they can point to at least 22 students that have been through their program that they know are no longer alive and well today. These 22 students' lives cut out way too early, way too young. There's too much potential, too much life, too much love, too much vitality, too much hope that has been lost in the city of Portland. And we'd like to see that brought to an end. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Ed. Thank you very much for educating us about FITCOG's work and your commitment to this serious and urgent issue. Next, we're going to hear from Andrew Scott. We're anxious to hear what you have to say.
Great, thank you very much, and thanks again for the invitation tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about Portland Public Schools' recent adoption of a new policy that prohibits the carrying of firearms by people with concealed weapons permits on school grounds. And I'll give a little bit of background and go through a little bit of the process in terms of how we got there. In summary, in June of this last year, just a few months ago, the board adopted a new policy that does restrict anyone with that concealed firearms license from bringing a gun on a PPS property. And I think the major takeaway that I'm hoping people get is that I think we really, and this gets back to what we heard from Dr. Carlson. I think we were successful because we really did take a public health approach to this, and we acted in line with the public health research along with our community's priorities in order to move forward with that ban. So for just a little bit of quick background, we've actually prohibited firearms at our schools for a long time. And I don't know the exact date, but that's been a school policy for some time. But there was a state law that required, that sort of allowed for this loophole, and that people who had concealed weapons permits were allowed to bring firearms, onto school grounds. In the 2021 legislative session, the state legislature passed a bill. It was Senate Bill 554. That gave school boards the authority to adopt a new policy that could restrict people who hold concealed carry firearms licenses from bringing those firearms into school district property. And it went a little further to clarify that, you know, if those policies were adopted and someone did it, they'd be guilty of a Class A misdemeanor. So in terms of our overall timeline for this, you know, it moved relatively quickly once we sort of were ready to go with it. In April of this year, our policy committee reviewed and considered the policy and any proposed revisions, you know, to our weapons with prohibited policy. In May of this year, the board was presented with the first reading of the policy. So we always have a first reading, then we allow for public comment and then come back and finalize it. The policy committee did take public and staff comment during that month, the end of May and in June. And then by the end of June, the board came back and we did approve that revised weapons policy that, again, it upheld the current ban on weapons on school grounds and then further restricted people with concealed firearm licenses from bringing guns onto school property. And that included schools, it included our central office buildings, athletic fields, and parking lots, really anywhere sort of on the PPS grounds. And, you know, again, we were able to do this with actually pretty minimal opposition. And we're going to walk through a little bit of the process as to how we got there. And I think it does really start with that public health mindset. I think our staff in Portland Public Schools did a really excellent job of presenting the public health research, both to the policy committee and to the overall board, that was really compelling. And I think, you know, as I mentioned, the folks on this panel are far more knowledgeable about this than I am. But it was a really interesting process as a board member, you know, to read through some of that research. And, you know, again, I think I'm telling people what they probably already know, but, you know, the research shows that armed school resource officers do not reduce injuries during mass shootings. There really is no association between having those armed school resource officers and gun violence deterrence. We also know that individuals seeking a concealed handgun license in Oregon, they're not required to show evidence of experience with a firearm, which was also some concern. And then whether trained or untrained, the research shows that gun users are ineffective at self-defense. And this is something that I think we knew 20 years ago and continues to be the case today. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence and stories of this, but the research actually shows that, you know, most shots that are fired in self-defense, they miss their targets, even when they're fired by trained gun handlers. Most of the self-defense training that people receive doesn't go beyond target practice, and it doesn't really emulate the speed or anxiety or pressure of a real situation. And that we know that self-defense gun use is very rare, and that, you know, the bottom line is that it's not more effective at preventing injury than other protective actions that we can also be taking. And so, again, our staff did a really good job, I think, of compiling that evidence for us as a board and for our policy committee and for our community as well. We put it out there. And I think that was really the basis where we started. I think a couple other things that helped move this forward and be effective. We did have some outside advocacy groups, and there may even be some people here, you know, watching tonight who helped with that. But Everytown for Gun Safety reached out to individual board members, really to lobby on behalf of the policy. And, you know, I was, you know, as a board member, they reached out. They wanted to schedule some time, which I was happy to do. And I was just really impressed with the way they just came at it in a very sort of open, informative way. There was lots of space for questions and answers. And again, I think similar to our staff, they really just presented it from this public health standpoint and sort of getting at what I'm going to call some of these cultural myths that I think are out there, and they actually really resonate with people. This whole idea of, well, what about a good person with a gun, and could they stop a school shooting, and really sort of unpacking that and seeing what's behind it, and realizing that that's not really going to improve safety. You know, I also think that we were fortunate to have board members who were really inquisitive and open to looking at this issue and considering some different viewpoints. Just to be really blunt about it, we have multiple gun owners on the Portland Public School Board and multiple people on our board that actually have concealed weapons permits. And so you can imagine, you know, they approach this issue, you know, also thinking about it from that standpoint of well, wait, as a concealed weapons permit holder, what does that mean? And again, the intent of this policy was not to demonize or villainize concealed weapons permit holders. who generally are not, an issue when it comes to crime, but recognizing that there are incidents of accidents, there are incidents of, concealed, and you can read about throughout the country of people who have training, who have backgrounds, who've been through this, bringing a weapon in and leaving it in a restroom, or having it fall out of a pocket, or having it accidentally discharge. And there are real safety issues there as well. And I'll just say that not of the 7 board members in Portland Public Schools, not everyone started in the same place when it came to this policy. But I think because of the good staff analysis, because of the advocacy that we got, the really effective advocacy we got from some groups, from community groups, and also just a general openness and willingness to learn more, we were able to achieve an overall unanimous vote when we adopted this in June, which I think was a real success. And maybe the last thing I'll say in terms of process is that we also were pretty intentional about being somewhat under the radar with regards to this policy change. And I want to be careful with that, because we didn't sacrifice transparency. As a government person and public policy person, I think that transparency is really important. Everything we did was done in open meeting session. Everything we did was published on our website. Anyone who was interested, could see what are the changes we were proposing, what are the things we were considering, and we had plenty of ample opportunity for people to testify, both at our public meetings and at our policy committees, or just to submit written testimony as well. What we didn't do, though, was issue press releases, right? We didn't say, go out and say, hey, look at what we're doing, and look at what we're gearing up to do. And, we learned some of those lessons as we went through the pandemic. And one of the interesting things for me, and I've only been on the board for about 3 years, when we considered, we're doing things like mask mandates in our schools, when we were considering vaccine mandates, which we didn't end up adopting, but we did consider pretty seriously for a while for our students. One of the things we realize is that often gets picked up in this hyper politicized media environment. And we had people driving into our school board meetings from outside of our district and from far outside of our district. We had lots of people coming in from Washington State, from Idaho, from other places in Oregon, people who don't live here, who don't have kids in Portland Public Schools, who were pushing back. And I think from those lessons, we really, realized we were pretty certain, and I feel pretty confident in saying that the policy we adopted is reflective of the values of our community here in Portland and Portland Public Schools. I think by maintaining the transparency, which I think is important, but not really being out there super publicly to inflame tensions from folks who might live outside of our district, I think that also really helped. And we did have a couple people testify in opposition, which of course, we welcome people, of all political persuasions to come in and testify, but it was very different than some of those earlier debates. And I think that also helped lead to the overall success. And the last thing I'll leave this group with is I do want to stress that this policy change, I think it was important, and I'm glad we did it. I'm very proud that we did it. I do think it's a really small piece of our overall approach to student safety. And particularly as I'm listening to some of the other panelists, talk here tonight, and some of the things we need to do, it's just really one small piece in our multifaceted approach to keeping our students safe. And our community has really asked us to take a holistic approach to student safety. And so in addition to policies like this, we also have violence prevention programs. We have behavioral safety assessment systems. We have student intervention teams. We have a restorative justice framework for when students get in trouble or they get in fights or there are conflicts, and how we work through those. We have behavioral and mental health supports, which we've really dramatically increased over the last couple of years, and comprehensive school counseling, school psychology, social work programs that are really intended to address some of these issues before they rise to the level of violence, or at least hopefully before they do. There are also some very specific physical safety and security upgrades as a district we've done. Voters passed a bond in 2020 that has about $26 million for safety. We've installed interior locking hardware on more than 2,400 of our classroom doors, or at least we will have done that by the end of this school year. We're updating our intrusion alarm systems. We're adding more security cameras at school campuses. And finally, our staff, under the leadership of our superintendent, prepare for potential crises and how to respond to them. And this includes our Portland Public School security services as well as our rapid response teams. And I think all of those things combined with the policies that I mentioned tonight are really focused on doing everything we can to keep our kids safe. And we know that the most effective interventions are going to be upstream interventions. They're going to be identifying issues before they become problems. And I think we're continuing as a district to really talk about what's the most effective way to do that. And that's also where we really welcome community input. And I think to the extent that people have ideas and community input on ideas, but also community notification of problems and issues. And there are lots of different ways you can flag that through there, and I don't have them with me, unfortunately, but you know, there's local and state lines you can call, you can notify people at the school. And I think those are the ways we hopefully head off some of the school violence we've seen in Oregon and elsewhere. So I think I'll go ahead and leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Lessons learned, and appreciate all the measures you're taking to keep our kids safe. Paul Kemp, the floor is now yours.
So first off, I just want to clear the record. I myself am not a veteran. We have other members on our board who are veterans. I am not one. So just to get that out there. Again, I represent the Gun Owners for Responsible Ownership. And I'll move. Who we are, we're gun owners, outdoor enthusiasts, veterans, mothers, fathers, daughters, sons, who seek reasonable and responsible solutions to preventing gun violence. The reason we formed the group and got into this work was, again, because a couple of the board members lost family members in the shooting at the Clackamas Town Center Mall back in 2012. It'll be 10 years this December. And I, also want to remember that the shooter took his own life with one of those unsecured firearms. So it was a suicide in there as well. All the victims were strangers to the shooter, but to us, they were neighbors, family, and friends, co-workers, etc. The other thing is we believe that gun owners really need to help lead in the change of gun culture in America and the way it's been poisoned by elements of the gun lobby. We know that the Second Amendment rights come with responsibilities. There are good common sense regulations to reduce gun violence that have been passed in laws around the country. And there are more that need to be passed. Owning a gun should include a personal commitment to safe and responsible use of firearms. And a firearm can be a useful tool for hunting, target shooting, and so on. But rarely for personal protection. Defensive use of firearms is a highly overblown topic, and some exaggerated rates of defensive use of firearms are out there. And also, a firearm is not a toy nor a political statement. And safe storage can save lives at home, at school, and in the community. Just a point, I think it's around 60%, over 60% of kids who commit shootings in schools get those firearms from their home of a relative or a close family friend. So it's vitally important to lock up and secure firearms in your home. And some recent data shows that there are approximately 26,000 children in Oregon that live in homes with unlocked firearms. Nationally, about 89% of the unintentional shooting deaths of children occur in a home. And most of these deaths occur when children play with a loaded gun in their parents' absence. And again, here's the statistic: 73 to 80% of the school shooters obtain a firearm from their home of a relative or friend. Nearly half of those guns were not securely stored. We've had some examples here in Oregon over the years. And then some firearm data that from 2005 to 2016, there were over 28,000 guns reported stolen in Oregon. And my guess is that is a low number. I'm sure the number of firearms stolen is far higher than that versus the number actually reported. And then during the same time period, there were over 1,600 guns that were reported lost. And at this rate, you know, it's over 7 firearms are stolen or lost each day for 10 years. And then a 2017 study found that a vast majority of the 23,000 stolen firearms recovered by law enforcement between 2010 and 2016 were connected to crimes. And a well-built metal lockbox or gun safe can deter theft. It's a good idea for those that own firearms to write down firearm serial numbers, keep a record of the type of firearm that you had, and keep the firearm and ammunition in a separate place. And that way you can make accurate reports to law enforcement, and they can either recover your gun or know how it perhaps maybe ended up in a crime scene. And basic rules of gun safety: always assume a firearm is loaded, regardless of how skilled you are with firearms. You know, #1 safety rule: always assume it's loaded. Never point or aim a firearm at anything you do not intend to shoot. Always store and secure your firearm when not in use. And what is safe firearm storage? All guns should be kept unloaded and locked. Ammunition should be locked and stored separately. Don't share lock combinations for lock boxes or trigger locks, and store keys and so on for the lock boxes or trigger locks in a safe place, secure location. And also keep guns secured during transport. Cars do not count as a safe lockbox for firearms. Too many of the firearms stolen both in Oregon and across the country are stolen from cars. And I think, you know, people that have certain emblems or stickers on their cars from different gun organizations kind of advertise the fact that there might be a firearm in that car. What are the options for safe storage? Simple cable lock or trigger lock. These cost less than $10, and they prevent the weapons from being fired. Can generally do, depending on how it's engaged on the firearm. And there are a wide variety of gun safes and lockbox options are available at retail stores here in the area, and certainly plenty of options online as well. If buying a safe, we recommend choosing one that is certified by the California Department of Justice. And you can look there. The Oregon DOJ has not developed a list of certified lockbox devices or trigger locking devices. So that's why we fall back to that one. And just in these photos here, these are some examples of different types of locking devices on a handgun. You know, if you don't want to worry about a key with a trigger lock, they make some with a combination that you can set. This is one that is a manufacturer's provided gun lock that came with a firearm. And then the center photo shows a cable lock on a firearm. And one of the things I really like about the cable locks is you can see, to engage this properly on this handgun, the slide has to be back, the magazine has to be removed, and positively there is no round in the chamber. Even with the magazine removed, if somebody isn't careful or they're the ones who didn't store the firearm, there could be a round in the chamber with, say, a trigger lock or a keyed lock, these other examples. And that is often leads to an injury for someone who's not familiar with the guns and doesn't treat it properly as though it's loaded. And then this is a keyed lock on a semi-automatic handgun and a trigger lock on a paper revolver. And GoPro, all the money, the donations we receive, we purchase gun locks and give those to groups around the state of Oregon. We've provided gun locks to the Child Safety Center up at Dornbecker Children's Hospital. We've actually provided some to Portland Public Schools for staff. We've provided them to other school districts around Oregon. We have given presentations in pediatrician clinics, and we will leave locking devices with those clinics. Probably the single biggest trigger lock or gun locking device handout we did was a partnership with the St. Charles Medical Foundation in the Ben Lapine School District. We gave out 800 gun locks on back to school nights, and it got a lot of really good feedback. And this was several years ago. So even the politics of gun safety has changed since then, but even then it got really good positive feedback. And then these are just some commonly used handgun lock boxes. This is a simple keyed lock box. The center photo shows one that you can set the number combination to. And this also has a battery to run the this digital lock, but there is a key backup, and there is a small light, blue light that comes on when you open the lid. Some of them have an alarm that you can silence if you want. And then the one on the far right is a biometric lockbox. And none of these are terribly expensive. They're less expensive than any of the handguns that you might buy. This particular biometric lockbox, it'll handle up to 15 different fingerprints. They suggest using a fingerprint from each hand, a couple of different fingers, and whoever else you want in the home that would want access to this, you can add their fingerprints to this as well. So these are, and they're pretty secure. All these come with an option, a cable, so you could either anchor to a cable, loop it around structure in a car or truck, or in something in your home. If it was in a closet, you know, there's different ways of securing it, so you couldn't walk away with it easily. What, you know, the other thing with the passage of the Oregon Safe Storage Firearm Law, you know, what if I keep my gun in my home for self-defense? Safe storage means I can't access my gun in an emergency is a myth that's perpetrated by a lot of folks. The reality is safes and lockboxes using a simple 4-digit code biometric swipe of the finger are designed to be opened in seconds. These safes are readily available in retail stores, many costing less than $100. And you can and should lock up your gun no matter what. Any gun safety training class you take will tell you to do the same thing. The literature that comes with a firearm will also tell you the same thing. And then recently, a few years ago, we passed the Senate Bill 554, which is a requirement for safe and secure storage of firearms at home. These are some of the statistics and data around it. This does not result in a criminal violation. It is a civil violation. So it's we're not trying to criminalize gun owners, but the penalties can go up if someone is killed or injured as a result of an unsecured firearm and a child getting access to it. And then gun owners are also required to report theft of a firearm within 72 hours of knowing there was a theft or loss. And failure to report the theft is a Class B violation. And if the firearm is used to injure persons or property, and the owner is presumed negligent in court action for damages. There's some other regulations that go with this. I know we're running close on time. And the other thing to keep in mind, no gun lock is completely foolproof. If someone has unlimited time, they can defeat a gun lock. The idea is deterrence, and also in suicide prevention, it's putting some roadblocks in the way. And those things, based on studies we've read, those do help reduce incidents of suicide. And I guess the other thing, and there are a lot of programs that are out there, you know, ask if your children are going to someone else's home. If there's firearms, are they secured? That is the key thing. It's not whether or not they are a gun owner or to demonize guns. It's just if they do own guns, are they safely stored and secured? One thing I'd like to mention, in this, it seems like there's a lot of animosity with some of the gun rights groups and different, the cultural has changed around gun ownership. I just wanted to point out the Boy Scouts is an old organization in this country, and they have 2 merit badges, one for rifle shooting and shotgun shooting. To earn those badges, you have to score a certain level of marksmanship on the target practice. You also have to demonstrate knowledge of your state gun laws and hunting laws. So those are rules that are required of teenagers. We should be able to require those of adults and people who want to purchase a firearm, whether it be a handgun or a rifle. And then the last thing is, I learned this earlier this year, there's a company now that is marketing a Junior 15. It's a scaled down version of an AR-15 for children, for boys and girls. And these firearms were shown at the the SHOT Show, which is sponsored by the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which is based in Newtown, Connecticut. So, the firearms industry is not doing a better job at policing themselves and being more responsible in light of the gun violence in this country. That ends it. Thank you very much for everybody who's attending, and thank you for inviting us.
Thank you very much, Paul. We appreciate your commitment to promoting gun safety and reducing gun violence. And there are a lot of really good tips there for gun owners. So are there any additional comments that anyone would like to make after hearing those presentations, or any questions you might have for each other before we get to some questions from the audience? Okay, well, we'll dive right in then. And I just want to remind people to put any questions you have in the chat, and we'll try to get to them. Early on, there was a question for Pastor Ed about the affordability of the ShotSpotter, and also there was some questions about the airplane you mentioned, and wanted to know a little bit more about that.
Well, I'll take them in reverse. I can just tell you that PPB, Portland Police Bureau, they do have an airplane that they use as a part of their policing efforts. It is manned by a couple of people on their staff, and so its ability to be up is based upon the ability and the availability of the staff that are typically the operators of that plane. But they've had it for a number of years, and it's used to track activity that's track and locate activity that's going on in the city. And so it is one of several tools that can be used and that is being used in the prosecution of the work that they do. With regard to the affordability of ShotSpotter, it is estimated to cost around $70,000 per square mile of coverage. And in some of our earlier discussions, what we're talking about at this point is rolling this out on a pilot program basis. We haven't yet, there's been no official settlement on how many square miles of coverage will be utilized in that pilot program. But let's assume it's it's 10 square miles, do the math, $70,000, $700,000 for the ShotSpotter technology. Is that a lot of money? Yes, but let me give you the other side of the equation. Studies have been done on the cost of gun violence in the city of Portland. One injury shooting by itself costs upwards, to process that all the way through, costs upwards of around $600,000. To prosecute a murder or a homicide all the way through from start to finish costs about $1 million. So you can, again, do the math on the number of homicides that we have. You can do the math on the number of injuries that we have, and do the math yourself and figure out what we are already either incurring in costs or have out there to incur in terms of costs as we, go through the whole process of life and death associated with gun violence. And I think that $700,000 for a focused deterrence tool that can help bring down the level of gun violence, along with the other efforts that are going on, is a small price to pay. There are government grants, we are told, that are available that can be applied for to cover the cost of this. But we have to go through that process. But again, it's not inexpensive, but the cost that we are paying, both in actual costs and the cost that we're paying in terms of the emotional damage and trauma that continues to be laid upon our families and our communities and on generations to come, is countless.
No. Okay, thank you. I wanted to also bring up a question that came up about Measure 114 and the fact that in order to issue a permit, the permit is issued by a county sheriff or a city police chief. And there is a slight amount of discretion involved, although this is a shall issue. If an applicant meets the criteria, the permit shall be issued. There is a slight amount of discretion if there has been a pattern, a recognized pattern of danger to self or others involved. There is an ability to deny the permit. Now, I think there's some fear in some circles that there may be a racist element in this discretion. And that has been one of the pushbacks that we are hearing. And I'd like to know if any of you would like to address that issue. Okay, all right. Well, we'll just move on then.
I would just say, Marge, that in
Yeah.
all of our policies that we try, the conducting research and evaluation of those policies is of utmost importance. It's not enough to pass a law. We have to implement that law, and then we have to evaluate how it's doing. And part of that evaluation is that the balance of risks and benefits of that law and measuring the unintended consequences. An inequitable application of that law is one of those unintended consequences. We hope unintended, but that is one of those measurement outcomes that we would be after in terms of evaluating that. So I think we have to see and we have to be on top of it.
Agreed. Thank you for that comment. I also wanted to, someone asked on the what Andrew had said about the effectiveness of concealed weapons, and interest in knowing where to find that data on how effective concealed weapons are in preventing crime or in stopping crime. And so if you could point us to that, that person would like to know.
Sure. Yeah. And I just dropped a link in the chat, which I think should take you to the overall agenda for the board meeting. And it's our third to last item on that agenda. There was a staff report. I mean, I want to be clear, this is a staff report taking research from a lot of other places. So, but I think if you read through that memo, it will it will send you to folks and their links to studies that you can probably then follow from there to gain a much more comprehensive view. But I thought it did a good job of laying out some of the arguments and research that's been done.
Okay. And this next question may be that Kathleen can help us with. It has to do with the federal money that just came through, $100 million grant program. And how much of that went to Portland? And do you know what programs it was for? And I know you mentioned the one about the hospital-based program.
Yeah, I wish I had more details on that, but I do think that part of that money is coming to the city of Portland. I think it might be funding, at least in part, our Safer Summers PDX initiative that was rolled out this summer. The hospital violence prevention programs was funded by our state through House Bill 4045 earlier this year. So that was state funding. I think that's separate. So I'm a mostly yes on that, and I'm sorry I don't have more details to share.
It's okay. I do have information about that, but I don't have it at my fingertips right now. But that grant money mostly went to Portland. There was another program, I believe, in Eugene that got some of that money, but most of that 100 million went to Portland. I also have a question of my own, which has to do with the huge increase in the number of firearms that were sold during the pandemic. And the high number of first-time buyers, which is concerning, since those folks may not have the training involved in knowing how to use firearms. And a lot of those purchases were rather impulsive. And so I am wondering what you folks might think about a possible buyback program of some of these weapons. I know that other places in the country have had successful buyback programs. And what do you think about that?
Well, I have heard through some of our contacts with folks at PPB that while buyback programs, tend to touch a real emotional spot, within the community, and there's a lot of hurrah around that really, though, in the long run, they are they found them to be ineffective. So you get some gain, but overall the benefit is not as much as you would hope that it would be.
Okay. I'm also seeing a question about what do you see your fellow clergy members doing to address the impacts of gun violence, especially seeing how mass shootings have targeted faith communities as well?
Well, you see what Dr. Knutson has done. He's picked a lane and he's gone down that lane, and many of us, while you don't see us front and center, with him, we are, behind him, in the background working as well. There are many other clergy that I'm in a relationship with, while they are not in the position that I now find myself in, but they are supportive of the efforts that we are doing. Those other clergy are also involved in many other clergy are involved in another aspect of, efforts to reduce gun violence, because they're working in the community-based organization side of it, where they're working with youth and adults, trying to provide them with services and supports, as they either deal with the trauma of gun violence that's visited their families or their communities, or they're working with them to try and steer them in different directions. So clergy, I believe across the city, are all operating in a number of different lanes. All of them are not always as front and center, but just because you don't see them doesn't mean that they are not actively at work. And they certainly are supportive of the work that we as FitCog are doing in this area.
And I thank you for that. And I wanted to also clarify on measure 114 that there had been some other pushback on 114 about racism and the fact that and equity issues as far as the fee involved, the $65 fee to get a permit and the access to safety training possibly would impact, have a negative impact in people being able to afford to get this permit. This has been taken up by opponents as far as saying this is not an equitable measure. And so the fact that we have a fee involved is problematic, but I'm just wondering what, if anyone has comments about that particular aspect of the measure. All right, well, we'll move on. Let's see here.
Did you see this one, Marge, to the pastor that says, what has been the response to the fit among community members in communities of color, given the historical trauma involving police brutality?
Yes. So I am wondering if anyone wants to address that issue.
Yeah, can you give me that question again?
Can you repeat that, Kathleen, if you're seeing it?
What's been the community response to the fit within communities of color, given the historical trauma involving police brutality? So the tensions that you've experienced with fit versus communities with historical trauma.
So it's interesting. It's an interesting way in which that question is phrased, because I guess I got to separate history from current. So right now, there's no tensions between fit and communities of color. So to me, the question is sort of predisposed to setting up a tension that does not exist does not exist right now, and is not a part of the experience between the fit officers and the community. The historical problems that PPB has had in communities of color, we acknowledge that is a history and a truth that is there, and it's only time and relationship that will help to heal and to overcome that. This fit team recognizes that that's a part of the history that they that comes with doing this work. But they are a team that not only operates within communities of color, but they operate all across the city. And so these men and women are going in, very, very well versed, I believe, in the history that has occurred, and they are charting their own path, and they're asked to be they're asking to be viewed, for how they are currently operating and conducting business within the community, and not to be leveled with the with the challenges from the past, but they're cognizant of that. And so, we expect those officers to go in there and treat the community with the same type of humanity and kindness that they would treat any other community, whether they are in Black communities, Hispanic communities, Pacific Islander communities, Caucasian communities. Treat people with respect, and I believe you'll get respect in return.
Thank you very much. I am now going to turn it over. We have reached the end of our time, so I am going to turn it over to Debbie Kay.
Thank you, Marge, and thank you all. Thank you, our speakers. That was an extraordinary presentation. I learned a great deal. I'm sure everyone did. We appreciate the critically important work that you do to address this serious issue. I'm sorry we couldn't get to quite all of the questions. We are time limited. The League of Women Voters is an organization that exists to empower civic engagement. You, our speakers tonight, and the people that you're working with, you're part of a massive public community education process. We're grateful that you are serving our community and our state through your knowledge, dedication, and work in this area. Of course, I want to remind viewers and listeners about the importance of voting in the upcoming November 8th general election. The last day to register to vote is October 18th, and you can do so through our voter education website, vote411.org. You can also find the League's voter education materials there and on our website, lwvpdx.org. Thank you very much to the League of Women Voters of Portland members for their generous support. Thanks also to the participants and volunteers who made this program possible. In October, our YouTube and podcast recordings will feature candidate interviews and election forums. Links will be posted on our website, lwvpdx.org, and the podcast will be available on various platforms at LWVPDX Podcasts. Our next community education program will be a November 2022 election debrief, tentatively scheduled for November 16th. We are inviting experienced political analysts to debrief the audience about the November 8th election results. And please check our website for details as we get closer to that date. Thanks again to everyone for generous support and participation. The League of Women Voters is a membership organization. We welcome you to join us, and we would also value your financial support in presenting these and other important programs. Please see our membership and donor information at our website. We hope you will join us for another community education program in the near future. Thank you again. Good night.